Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight we're joined by two-time UFC heavyweight champion. Do I even need to tell you his name? Frank Mir. Frank, we're so excited to have you on. A little scared. I know that there's some distance here, so we're in good shape. I feel like there would be nothing more terrifying than going against you in a fight. I know your record. I know all of it. But one of the, I think, boldest things that has happened with you lately is that you're not afraid, Frank. You're coming out hot. You're telling it like it is. And I just got to ask you from just the jump here, why have you been so outspoken and forward with knowing Donald Trump, supporting conservatives, etc.? That's a dangerous spot to be in these days.
No, it's funny. Actually, I was at a birthday party last night, and I brought up my support of Trump, and it almost ended the party.
Oh my God!
Nowadays, it's not a very safe stance to take, but my whole life I've grown up in a gym. I've lived martial arts type of lifestyle, and it's been what I've done and how to conduct myself as a man. It's how I train my children, how the type of adults they're going to be, from my daughter to my sons. And I guess with that mindset, in the last couple of years, I've looked around and realized that everybody wants to give back to society in some way. You can be a doctor, police officer, firefighter. These are all great avenues and you're going to help out. But, I think politics is how we actually affect people's day-to-day life and quality of life. And looking around, I see that, our country's in trouble. Our viewpoints of what it's like to be a man are completely diminished. I mean, now what I consider masculine, other people tell me are toxic, awful thoughts. And it baffles me that the way I tell my sons on how to be and what my daughter should look for in a man are considered taboo and awful. And, if we don't start speaking up, and I think the problem is that majority of people think like I do. But we just have a life, and I don't have time to sit here and scream on the internet and make my voice be heard in such a way. But the problem is if the majority keeps staying silent, I think eventually we're going to be in a position where we're going to be very unhappy where our children are heading.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I want to say thank you for being willing to speak up and speak out. And gosh, I hope the birthday party ended okay. I hope it wasn't a complete disaster.
Turned out okay.
But it's actually interesting because it's very hard to have friends, I feel like, these days that are not like-minded. You look back to 10 years ago, people didn't really talk about politics in the way we do now. And honestly, I have to attribute a lot of that to my father-in-law. I think he really reinvigorated people's interest in politics. It was something that kind of like old people were into. And the old saying, like, if you aren't a Democrat when you're young and a conservative when you're old, like that whole thing. But people started paying attention, I think, when Donald Trump got involved in politics. What about for you? I mean, you've spent your life really as an athlete. You've spent your life in the ring. People have known you from your UFC fighting, etc. I just heard you're going to go speak at CPAC. Is that true?
That's something that's in the works. It looks like it's a possibility. So,
wow. Well, I love it. I think it's super exciting. I think CPAC is awesome. But what about for you? When did you start paying such close attention to politics? Has it been something you were always interested in and just sort of like didn't talk about? What made you kind of want to speak up now? And is it something you've always been interested in?
It's something I've always been interested in, but it was always taboo. It was always like, hey, at a dinner party, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics. And I think my breaking point where I finally just put my foot down, like, all right, guys, enough's enough. Like, this is ridiculous. I mean, no one else can possibly think that this is okay. Is our transgender issues with allowing transgender athletes, former males, to compete with women. And when that started happening, I'm like, all right, guys, like, now that's like something out of a cartoon. Like, there's no way that you guys can think that you want to be that open-minded that the person who's not a woman gets to now compete against women. And I have a daughter who's a national champion wrestler. She's an undefeated professional fighter. I know what an elite woman can do. And I also know that the average man is still going to be superior in a lot of physical contests. It blows my mind that when they were lying, I'm like, wait a minute. You identify as a woman now, you can fight as a woman. Well, that totally spits in the face of what we consider fair competition.
Right.
For example, we have weight classes because me fighting against a man who's half my size isn't very fair competition. Not that he couldn't have a chance of maybe being successful, but more often than not, they're going to lose. That's why we have weight classes. But could you imagine if I told people I identified as a lightweight? Hey guys, I might walk around at 260 pounds, but I feel like I'm a light guy. You know, I mean, look at how I talk, how I think, how I move. I'm really a 155 pounder stuck in a heavyweight's body. So
Right.
don't interfere with how I feel. I mean, and changing my weight is a lot less than changing your sexual or your gender identity. And so I think that was, like, come on, guys, this has to be some common sense that we have to start having. And are their feelings going to be hurt? Absolutely. Do I think that should impede on certain other rights? Well, no. But I mean, at a certain point, we got to draw a line in the sand. And that's when I started feeling like this is going way too far.
Wow. What a good, I mean, it's an analogy, but it's true. There is a reason that you have weight classes in all different sports, wrestling, MMA, all of it, boxing, because you want fair competition. And look, I was an athlete my entire life. I still am. And as much as I hate to admit it, Frank, you're right. I am never going to be as good as a man at any of this stuff. And I can work as hard as I want, but a genetic male will have a very different muscular skeletal makeup than I do. They have more testosterone in their bodies, etc. And there's no way that is a fair competition. I have a daughter as well. Now she's only 2, but I think about if we continue down this path, what happens then whenever she's in middle school and high school, and whenever she starts possibly doing all the different sports that I played growing up? What'll it be like? So that's really interesting. And I think you're right. I think so many people feel the way you do. They're just terrified to speak up about it. And you probably are giving them a little more courage to say what they think, whether you realize it or not. But you brought up your daughter, and I want to ask about your daughter because, quite frankly, what a badass. How cool is it that she followed in her dad's footsteps? How does that make you feel? Do you think that she did it because she wanted to be like you? Was she just always innately interested in it?
She was. From day one, my daughter, there's pictures of her first learning how to walk, and she's arm barring me. I'm putting my arm on her, wrapping her legs around my bicep and squeezing and driving. So she was, always a part of it. And I want all of my children to be martial artists. But it's kind of like our faith. It's our way of thinking. It's like our philosophy. It's what we do to make ourselves stronger and better every day when we wake up in the morning. It's a way of life. Now, making money off of it is not anything I wanted my children to be able to do. Excuse me. Because it's kind of like being a musician. I think all of us can agree if you know how to play a musical instrument, there's countless studies showing how it helps out the brain, and eye-hand coordination and all these different attributes. But if your kid says, hey, I'm going to not go to college and I'm going to go and be a professional musician, I think most of us would panic. And that's kind of how I feel about being a professional fighter. I made a good living at it throughout my career. But I mean, I've been in the gym with thousands of people that are just as good that can't pay the bills. And so I didn't want my daughter to go that route. I actually tried to do everything I could to talk her out of being a professional fighter. And it basically came to a point where I looked at her and go, well, this ship is sailing. I'm either going to be on the dock watching or I can be on the bow steering. So I guess I might as well jump on it and make sure she has the safest, most, learn from my mistakes and have the both worlds. And so I'm a part of her career and help push her forward. And hey, but I'll tell you what, if she came in the door right now and said, hey, Dad, I think I'm going to go and just, I'm going to pursue this engineering thing, I'm the first one to go ahead and scream with tears of joy.
No, I understand. And obviously, as a parent, I can fully appreciate that. You started out as a wrestler, right?
Right. I actually started out, my father owned a karate school. And so I grew up very much of a hard style of karate. It kind of like looked very akin to like above the waist kickboxing. And then I started high school. And then from there, I just was training just to train. I found a jiu-jitsu school. I found it interesting. And I have an attribute where I have a hard time saying no to things. So one day in the gym, someone asked me if I would take on a fight. And I was like, man, sure, why not? I want to test myself. I was just doing it just to go ahead and push myself to higher levels. I always considered like, the cage of the ring is kind of like a forge, and you want to test yourself. You want to push yourself and melt and break yourself down. I always tell people, if you give sentience to a sword, if a sword became alive right now and it had thought, and I asked him, hey, what do you think about the forging process? The sword would probably tell you it was the worst experience of his existence. But if without that, it wouldn't be a sword. You know what I mean? So we need hardship in our life. We need suffering. We need things to crash against that breaks our soul. And I've always used martial arts as that. And I just got lucky enough that I got paid to do it.
Wow. God, you're so right. I mean, everything is made so easy for kids today. Obviously, I've talked about this on the show before, but you don't learn from the easy stuff, and it doesn't create the character that ultimately makes you the person you become. It's the tough challenges you go through, the battles, the hardships. I mean, I got married, Frank, with 2 broken wrists because 3 weeks before my wedding, I ride horses, and I had an accident on my horse, and I broke both my wrists, and I gave myself like a 12-hour pity party and cried about it. And then I was like, you know what? Anyone that knows me would not be surprised that I'm walking down the aisle with 2 broken wrists. But those are the things that I feel like we're missing a lot of in our youth. I feel like there's this entire generation that has been so coddled, and they're just so soft and mushy. And I look back, to like 70 years ago when, 18-year-olds were crossing the English Channel on D-Day. I think about my grandparents and what they went through, and the generations before them through the Great Depression, etc. We are so lucky, but we're so coddled. And that has to be one of the reasons that you wanted your kids to, whether it's wrestling or yes. MMA or right, like that's one of the reasons you wanted them to do that.
The fact that you are an athlete and you've dealt with hardship, both physically, mentally, and spiritually, is what makes you what you were able to do. A lot of other people that had not played sports and probably had dealt with some of the things you dealt with would have probably postponed their wedding. But I tell my children, like, look, you don't have to play the sports I played, but you're going to play something. That was one of the rules in my household. Just as important as it's mandatory that we give our children education, I think that there's an athletic side that should be also mandatory.
Totally agree.
In our society, we make jokes about it, dumb jocks or whatever the case may be, and we just don't put the significance on it that it is. And the problem is that, look, we all hit the lottery. Even our poor people in this country aren't poor. I see vagrants on the side of the street talking on cell phones. You know what I mean? Like, I travel the world. I've seen poor, and it doesn't exist in America. And so my children are upper middle class. I knew from the very beginning that they weren't going to get mugged for their milk money. They weren't going to deal with hardships where they go without food. So how would I make them warriors? How would I make them tough? And that was sports. And it's funny. I've had issues where I've gone to other private schools my children go to, and I've tried to establish different programs and help out. And some of the parents freak out on me. They think I'm a barbarian. And there's a time where I was younger, I just kind of smiled and laughed. I'm like, okay, no problem. Because when my daughter and your son are in a board meeting, my daughter's going to eat you alive. Your child will cry, go back out, calm, ask for a Xanax and see how they can go ahead. Mommy, come home, make me a meal. And whereas my kids are going to destroy your children, because I raised warriors. And I'm looking around going, okay, the young version of me that was very selfish and short-sighted, that worked. But now I'm looking around going, well, I can't really live in a society of gardeners. Like, everybody here has to kind of pick up the pace. And that's one of the reasons why I've been more vocal and more actually even enamored with Trump. At first, when he first came out, everybody was against him. Like, hey, guys, you got to admire a guy that not only he beat the whole Democratic Party, he beat it in Hillary Clinton, who's basically the representation of everything we see wrong in politics, just a career politician, completely ingrained in the system. But he beat the Republican Party too, because they weren't really on his side. Like, this guy beat everybody. I'm like, you don't want that as your leader, as a warrior, as somebody who's abrasive and harsh and able to take things on and be a challenging. I don't want a pushover or a soft individual taking the leads. I don't need to want to have a beer with you. I need you to be a warrior. And that's what I saw in Trump.
Yeah, you don't have to like somebody in order to appreciate that they're working hard to keep our country safe, to keep things headed in the right direction, to give people the greatest opportunities possible, etc. Maybe you don't love everything that somebody tweets, although we know that he's been taken off Twitter. A whole nother topic, Frank, for discussion. But I think you're right. And I think more and more people have come around to that as time has gone on. I think a lot of people are probably missing Donald Trump right now because, man, things went downhill pretty quickly in the past year in our country. And there was one thing that changed. It was just that a whole new administration was sworn in, and we know what has happened since then. But you have, Frank, I told my husband before we sat down to do this interview, I said, oh yeah, Frank Mears coming on the show today. And he goes, oh yeah, we hung out with him at Mar-a-Lago. I was like, Did I hang out with Frank and I didn't even know? The answer is no.
I
You
don't
and
remember. No,
yeah.
I got Eric and Don, and actually I think Kim even walked over and said hi.
Yeah. Yeah, well, everyone left me out of it. So although we were in the same room together for New Year's Eve, you and I are having to actually meet each other for the first time across the country. But I love that. That is so my husband. He just assumed that like I was there and I was part of it. I was like, no, I was not. But how did you have, how was the time at New Year's? Did you enjoy yourself?
Very much so. I mean, obviously, I got to mingle and meet with a lot of like-minded individuals that, think along the lines I do. And obviously, I'm still young to this world. I've spent my time being a warrior on a spiritual and physical and mental level on a one-on-one type. Now going in more into politics and trying to learn and understand where things are going. To surround myself with individuals that are much greater than I am, that's the aspect. Just like if you first join a fight gym, you want to join a gym where everybody's better than you. And, walking in that room and talking policies and whatnot, I got to walk into a room where everybody was much more knowledgeable than I am. So it really did help me grow and push, and I was very excited to be there.
I love it. Well, I'm sorry I didn't meet you then. I have to confirm with my husband. I was like, I'm going to ask Frank about this because I don't think so. And then he told me that I had to ask you about the toehold because you have the only toehold submission in UFC history. What is that about? Tell people that aren't really like up and up on all of the MMA stuff. What is that?
Okay, it's actually a foot lock, which means that I'm breaking the person's foot, their ankle to be more specific.
Oh my God.
It didn't break, it only dislocated. So
beautiful. Wow.
And the reason why we call it a toe hold is because I actually grab the toe side of the foot, and that's where you kind of anchor. But you're actually holding the edge of the foot because we're not really allowed to break toes and fingers in my sport because they don't really deter somebody when they're in the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. They don't feel it anyways, but they get disfigured afterwards. So they actually ban that because it's not a successful move. If you're excited, you've been an athlete, or you're an athlete running around. People break toes and fingers all the time when their adrenaline's pumping. Then you stop and you're like, oh man, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes later, you actually feel it. I've broken my collarbone too. And I didn't know it until I went like this and it was like, Mm-hmm.
Certain breaks and so those breaks we take out of our sport because we're like, well, it's not going to help you win a fight because the person's not going to stop. All it's going to do is make the person have a disfigured hand or a foot.
Oh my gosh.
I was fighting a guy named Abbott who hit extremely hard, benched 600 pounds. So I made sure quickly to go ahead and get on his legs and get as far away from his punching as possibly. And then I put leverage on his ankle. And I think he was surprised. He didn't know how to deal with it. So that's why it dislocated. And as soon as he did, he screamed and they stopped the fight. So.
Well, you won, and I assume he's fine now. They just popped it all back into place.
He was actually drinking beers later that night at the after party. We got to see
No way.
Weird, always to see your opponent that you've injured, hey, how's it going? Hey, what's up? How you feeling kind of takes on a whole different meaning.
Yeah, no, really. No kidding. So this is the thing this is why it would be very hard for me. I appreciate so much that, and of course you're supportive of your daughter competing in the same sport that you did. My brother was a wrestler in high school, and I remember going to these matches, and when somebody has someone that you love and care about in these contorted positions where Frank, that they're in pain and that it's so uncomfortable, it was all I could do to just like hold on to the bleachers and keep myself from like running up on the mat and like knocking this guy out, because it's hard to watch someone that you love get hurt. I mean, how's that been for you as a father with your daughter? How's it been for your wife, watching this stuff throughout the years? That must be hard.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. We found out my daughter's first fight. My wife actually handled it better than I did. And I couldn't figure that out. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I do this for a living. She says, yeah, but this is the first time you've been on this side of the road. Normally you're inside and we're worried about you. Now you're out here with us. Welcome to my world for the last 20 years.
She's been suffering for years, Frank.
No, the funniest one I complained to was my father. I told my dad, I was like, Dad, Bella's going to fight. I don't know what I'm going to do. He's like looking at me, he goes, so you don't want her to fight? I'm like, no, Dad, how awful would that? And I kind of stopped. I was like, oh, sorry.
Wow. You're my entire life you've been dealing with this. Oh my gosh. But I have to talk about this because although you were a two-time heavyweight champion, you hold the most records for the most finishes and most submission victories in UFC heavyweight history. When you were in high school, you lost your first 9 wrestling matches, and then you went on your senior year to go 44-1 and won the state championship, right? Like, you stuck through it. How was that though in high school? Because I tell you what, in high school, it's easy just to kind of like give up and be like, forget it. I didn't do well my first time out. I'm just going to give up now. Like, what made you choose to stick with it?
The problem was I was cursed with athleticism. And people laugh when I say that sometimes.
I understand, though. I know what you mean.
Right, yes, because I was so good at everything I did the first time I did it. And the problem was I played football, and I was extremely good at that. I was a fullback in the game. We ran for 455 yards. We set the state record.
Wow.
With me and the other tailback. So, I was very athletic. Problem was they said I wasn't mean enough. So and I don't know if that was true or not, or the football coach was also the head wrestling coach. He wanted me to come out for wrestling. So lo and behold, I come out my junior year, and here I'm this gifted athlete that I'm used to just running people over on the field. And, in karate, I understood and did well at competitions and that. But all of a sudden now I'm wrestling, and it's brand new to me. And I'm getting smashed by pudgy, because I'm a heavyweight. So, these pudgy fat kids that I would normally run circles around are putting me on my back and So I kind of, after the last match I lost, I remember I went home. I had a girlfriend at the time. I called her up, and then I got the phone, and I cried for about an hour, and then I just realized, I'm like, well, how do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be when I get older? Do I want to be the type of person that looks back on this moment and ran away from their fear, or ran into it? So basically that's what I did. And I tell people a lot of times, you can't control whether you win or lose, but you can control how you walk that path. And so I continue just to put one foot in front of the other and figure out that, hey, as long as I don't stop, I'm either going to get better or not. I'm going to improve in one way. It's either going to be a slow grinding process, or I'm going to figure it out. But either way, the only way I pretty much guarantee failure is if I quit. And so I stuck with it, had a successful career on from that, went on to jiu-jitsu and did extremely well at that, then into an MMA career that, now has bode me well.
What a good lesson, and what a good way to look at things. Anytime there are challenges in my life, and believe me, we've been through a lot in the Trump family. I always look at these things. These are really actually great tests of who you are as a person, and nothing worth achieving ever comes easily. Like if you had gone out and you had just won all of those matches your first time on the mat, it wouldn't have meant as much your senior year, right? To win the championship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need hardships, but I do feel bad for people that, like, for example, I don't think people understand it, because I get to be famous sometimes and sometimes I'm not. It kind of depends on what environment I'm in. Yeah. I remember thinking actually of your husband, because that night, after Mar-a-Lago, I texted him, hey, we're going to some yacht, this and that. And he was gracious about it. Oh yeah, thanks. I was sitting there going, he can't show up. There's no way. Poor guy, life in a fishbowl.
He's fine.
I kind of get that, and I think that your whole family probably has to, people don't realize the stress that's under that. You guys go to the supermarket and you're on. Someone's watching you, someone's looking, someone's judging.
Probably. I go in like a hot mess though, so they probably don't know who I am, like a train wreck with 2 kids. So it's probably going fine for me.
Because whenever someone meets me out, they're like, oh, that's the wife. And then they see her dressed up whenever we actually do get to go out.
Yeah.
The mistress or something, because I can look completely different without, all fixed up and done up, just run to the store.
Totally. It's all of it, I think is really cool that you have done, but I have to ask you, as a parent of 2 kids, if you had to pick one of the different sports you played, disciplines, anything, whether it's martial arts, whether it's MMA, whether it's wrestling, football, what would you say is the best to put a kid in at a young age? Because my kids are 2 and 4.
Wrestling, 100%.
I hear that a lot.
Where you wrestle with a team you're scoring points for, but obviously there's a very individualistic aspect where it's you on the mat with another person, and there's no one there to help you. There's no one there to rescue you. It's extremely difficult on your body, mind, and spirit, but without the concussions. I love boxing.
Mm-hmm.
I love, but I'm not a big fan of children taking shots to the head. I'm just not. The more learning about the development of the brain, concussions. I've had my share of concussions, and I still seem to be able to string a sentence together well.
You're doing all right.
Let's not push it, and I don't want, so I tell people, put your kid in wrestling. Half the time, club fee, it's inexpensive, and it's hard. You're going to teach them, they're going to lose. They're going to get their feelings hurt. They're going to have hard days. It's going to hurt. They're going to have success, and it's going to be so enjoyable when they come on the other side of it, when they win, and it's going to constantly be a revolving door, just like life is. Just because you succeed on Monday, no guarantee of success on Tuesday, and that's the rest. I think it's like life basically incarnate on the mat.
And you know what? Some of the nicest people that I remember from high school were all wrestlers. For some reason, they were all really good guys, and they weren't all from like the same crew of people. I just really remember them being solid people, all of them. And that's what stands out in my mind. And when I think about, well, how, like, what would I want my son to be like in high school? That's exactly it. So my husband and I have talked about that. We both definitely
100%.
want to get our son at least into wrestling. But what you said, go ahead.
Even on a side note, I told my daughter, like, look, if you come home with a college football player or a basketball player, I'm going to put him through the ringer. I'm going to investigate. If it's a college wrestler, he already has a pass. I'm going to go ahead and be like, all right.
You're right. It's
All
so
right, I already know
interesting.
all right. Now, I mean, obviously, I'm still going to investigate a little bit and have a conversation with him, but he already has a, I'm biased. He has a head start in my mind.
It's so true. Gosh, I hope my son's going to watch this one day and be like, well, now I'm never wrestling because my mom wanted me to. Side note, my dad was like obsessed with me being a basketball player. And although I was really great at basketball, because I knew how badly he wanted me to do it, for some reason, I decided that was the one thing I wasn't going to really super pursue. And so I keep that in mind too. I'm like, you know what? If you push your kids too hard into something, you had a fine line though. It was almost as though you didn't fully want your daughter to get into it because you knew how hard it would be for her, and she did it anyway, right? So
true. Or maybe I would have been able to help myself out if I would have pushed a little bit harder.
Yeah, maybe.
But I've seen too many children that their parents burn them out, and I never wanted to do that.
No, you don't want to do that either. The way you described your prowess in athletics and how disappointing it was whenever you weren't immediately good at wrestling is exactly how I feel about golf, Frank. Let me just tell you something. The first time I really tried to play golf, and I'm lucky because the Trump golf courses are some of the best in the world. When my husband and I first started dating, he was like, yeah, we got all these golf courses. You should try playing golf. I thought naively, I was going to pick up a golf club and be like PGA ready. And clearly, just because you're a good athlete, you are not a good golfer. I learned that lesson the hard way.
Probably the last person to say that about golf. I've heard they just lose less at golf.
Oh, man. And let me tell you, I could basically go out and just not make a complete idiot of myself on the golf course. Just as long as I'm not fully embarrassing myself, that's basically what I want to maintain there. I'm never going to have enough time to dedicate to really get good, at least not right now. Maybe later in life. I never say never because, we like a challenge.
When you swing the golf club with your wrist and whatnot, do you have any injuries?
Well, look at this. Let me just show you this. I don't know if you can see this bump on my wrist. If we got any doctors watching, I think it's called a ganglion cyst.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I got to go to a doctor about it. That's something that keeps coming back. I've got a nice scar there. You probably can't see it on this screen. A nice scar on my wrist. But I mean, generally speaking, I'm okay. I had some great doctors that helped me out.
It was the stem cells. It's really helped my injury. So if you guys want it another time, I can always send you the information to who I use. BioAccelerator, they're phenomenal. They really helped me out with my injuries.
You got all the tricks. I love it. Do you do the cryogenic stuff, by the way? Like the cold?
Yeah, 3 minutes under where you freeze yourself. Yes.
Yeah, I got to get involved in this stuff. Like I see these things everywhere. I am the biggest wuss when it comes to cold, so I don't know how that would go.
My life,
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I know you. I need to get on that path because I'm not getting any younger. Let's be honest. I have to ask you really quickly before we end the show about your motorcycle accident, because my dad had a motorcycle accident right after he got out of college. He moved out to San Francisco to play football, sort of ended his professional football career. You had this motorcycle accident. Because of it, you lost your belt. You had a really hard time kind of coming back. And I'm assuming it was a hard time coming back. But wasn't there some rule implemented after this that people aren't allowed to ride motorcycles, like fighters?
Yeah, no, actually after that, the UFC started putting in the contracts that basically you had okayed your extreme sports with them, and motorcycle being one of them. And so, yeah, no, the motorcycle accident really was one of my blessings in life because it really took away my athleticism for about 2 years. And it took away a lot of my strengths and it made me have to rely on other aspects. And at first, I got to be honest with you, I failed. I failed miserably. I fell flat on my face, and thank God I was married to a very strong woman that kept after me and allowed me. And I kept looking at my children and realized what kind of example I wanted to be to them. Had I been a single man with no kids, I wouldn't be here today. I failed myself, but luckily there's enough warriors still left in me that I didn't want to fail the ones that loved me. And so I pushed forward. I dealt with an opiate addiction afterwards because, that was 2004. I went through 180 of the Percocets they gave me the first 2 weeks. And then I called up the pharmacy and said, hey, I'm hurting. Hit me another 180, no problem. Come pick them up. And so, obviously that was before we realized the epidemic that would be, that we've now got ourselves into today. But that's why I'm actually a proponent of Kratom. There's all kinds of things I do that are healthy alternatives. I'm part of American Shaman for CBD. There's all kinds of things that the body can do to heal. And granted, we need those. You need, look, a vegetable ain't a vegetable anymore nowadays with the farming we have. So we do need to take vitamins and whatnot. But I struggled for a long time. And basically there's a fight where you can watch where I get a guy in a Kimura and they go to my wife and my sister in the crowd and they're freaking out. And probably everybody's thinking like, dude, you've already won a heavyweight championship. How is she freaking out so badly on this simple victory that you had? But the problem was, it was my third fight after the accident. The first fight I lost miserably. The second fight I won, but I was so out of, physically looked horrible and barely beat a guy that shouldn't have lasted more than a round with me. Third fight I lost. So here's my fourth fight. The UFC basically sat me down the night after the weigh-in, Joe Silva, and he's the vice president. He goes, hey, look, I'm just gonna be real with you. We don't think you have it anymore. You're done. Your leg, you were a champ at one time. Those days are gone. You're probably never gonna be a champion again. And so unless you come through and we see some glimpses of the Frank of old, we're gonna go ahead and not renew your contract. You're done. So I went on to go ahead and win in under a minute, submitted the guy. I looked like the old Frank Mir and actually went on to win a title. Submit Brock Lesnar, became a heavyweight champion for the second time. And that was the moment in my life where I sat there after Joe left the table, where I had where it was like coming to God moment, where I just realized, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to perish in the face of adversity, or am I going to go and stare death face on and then charge head in? And that's what I did.
Wow, you did, and you come back. And when was your last fight? It was last year, right?
Actually, I just fought in November.
Yeah.
It wasn't a great fight because actually I've years of what doing I'm doing. I degenerated my neck. So right now, actually, I wear a suit. I have a massive scar on my throat.
Oh, man.
I had to have my neck fused, and I needed it before the fight. And so I tried to postpone it, and I lost the function of my right arm. I probably was at about 10% strength. So I was like, oh, my kids are here. Do I pull out of the fight, or do I go and show them that how you face adversity? Once again, I'm going to walk into a battle against a lion, and I don't even have a spear, So I switched stances. I fought right-handed, even though I'm left-handed, and I tried to go out there and be victorious, and did not work out in my favor. I ended up losing very badly, but I never left my feet, So I took that as pride that, they stopped the fight and I never went down. And 2 weeks later, I was in the surgical room and they fused my neck together. And now I'm actually doing better. I can lift my arm up again, and I'm training. And I'm going to take this whole year off to heal. And I actually go back to BioAccelerator in July to get some stem cells. And 2023 will be my last year to fight because I just want to fight with my daughter on the card, so that I can
That's so cool.
Me and her will fight together, and that'll be my swan song. I'll go ahead and hand her my gloves, and the new Mir can take over, and it'll be her legacy now that she writes, and I go ahead and just step in the background and I just become a coach.
I love it. I you know what a great thing. What a great goal to have, something to look forward to. And we're all going to be watching, Frank. I'll tell you, you have a lot of fans out there, as I'm sure you're aware, that will always root you on, that now can root on your daughter. And who knows, do we feel like we're going to see any more Mir children involved in the sport? What do you think?
My son has been an avid football player. He's a freshman star.
Okay.
Foreman, and he won the Gale Award. And now he's wrestling at 195, and he's the #1 kid in the state. And now he just told me he likes wrestling more than he likes football. And now he's like wanting to learn. He goes, Dad, can you hold pads for me? I'm like, oh, I know where this is going. You want to fight too, don't you?
See, it's in their blood. They can't escape it. You can't escape it.
Going to be out in Bowerfield in Fort Lauderdale. We're going to put on some fights. Actually, as a fundraiser for the Republican Party, for our PAC. So we can talk more about it. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I want to say thank you for being an inspiration on so many different levels, in so many different ways. I feel inspired after this. I feel like I need to go do something that scares me. I mean, I still do. That's why I do triathlons, because it's terrifying to jump into water with a bunch of people you've never met. And so that whole thing always scares me. That's why I continue to do it. But you're very inspirational, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for letting us learn a little more about you today. Be well in 2022. We'll be looking for you in 2023. Good luck to the whole family. Give them all our best. And I hope next time you're at Mar-a-Lago, we can actually say hello in person. I'm going to get on my husband about this next time. So Frank Mir, thank you for joining us right here on The Right View. For everybody at home, thanks as always for joining us. We'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View.